Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of ISM New Jersey, myself, welcome to Supply Chain Information Flow. Happy New Year. Happy Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, whatever day today is. They all start to run together now. Today is an interesting one for me. My guest is Klauss, I hope I don't butcher his last name, Villalva. He's I got it right?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. He's the Global Category and Sourcing Lead for Capital Projects and Procurement with Corteva Agriscience. He's been in manufacturing and supply chain for 28 years with a bunch of well-known companies and within a multicultural, multinational environment. And he was recommended as a guest, and we had a conversation, and he just blew my mind just talking to him. So I feel like before we start, and before I start diving into talking to Klauss about his experiences in his life, I gotta take it back a little bit to my experience. I am, in case you don't know, a New Yorker. And as a New Yorker, there are New Yorker, American, however you want to put it, there's a very specific cultural dichotomy when you're talking to people, when you're working with people, when you are negotiating with people, you are the New Yorker. I came up working for very US specific companies. And I remember the first time I worked with a multinational organization, it was definitely a change and a challenge for me to understand the cultural differences, to understand my natural aggression and how it comes off to other people, and how my colleagues would, say, let's sick the New York guy on them, right? When it was time for a tough negotiation. Meeting Klauss, it opened up a whole new idea for me. Well, what was it like for someone else in another area to grow up and then have to deal with crazy New Yorkers like me? So with that in mind, Klauss, I would love for you to just, give a little bit of your background and tell us about how you came up in procurement and supply chain.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite. Appreciate being here with you guys and the opportunity to share my story. And I'm really passionate for different cultures and working with different peoples around the globe. But I'm a KME by background. I grew up and graduated in a part of. I'm from Brazil originally, and I graduated in the northern city of Brazil, the northeast city of Brazil. It's a very industrial area in the country. So I started working as a KME, as a process engineer. We have a big petrochemical complex in the area with several different companies. And that's when I started with a multinational company, a small company at that time called Griffin. And Griffin, few months after I joined Griffin, it became a joint venture with DuPont. So, and that it started, opened the door for me to different people. DuPont started bringing, people and, getting closer with Griffin and the local people. And I worked as process engineer and then black belt for a few years. And then I always had this passion also for continuous improvements. So my mind is kind of wired that we always need to challenge the status quo and improve, keep having this mindset of improving and improvement year after year, month after month. And then I had this very nice experience with Six Sigma with Heritage DuPont. But then I moved to the former Monsanto company. You probably have heard that Monsanto is now part of Bayer organization from a few years now. And I worked for almost 3 years with Monsanto. They were launching a greenfield facility at the complex. It was like just across the street from where the Heritage DuPont facility, the DuPont facility was. And then I worked with them for a few years, starting up the facility and start to get more engaged with engineering. That at the time was like a $350 million capital investment. And then DuPont acquired 100% of this joint venture with Griffin, and eventually invited some people to return back to DuPont. And I was one of them. And then I really started my leadership track. So I had different roles in production, operations, supply chain at the site at that time. And then back in 2011, DuPont invited me to move to US with the family. We lived in Mobile, Alabama.
Wow.
DuPont used to have a very large crop protection facility there. And I lived there for 3.5 years with the family. As you can imagine, it's quite an adjustment to leave the northeast part of Brazil to the south, the deep south of the US. But it was very interesting. It continued to open the door to me of engaging with different people. Up to that time, I had the opportunity to engage with people from Europe, a lot of people from the US, more from the northeast part of US, DuPont headquarters in Wilmington, as you probably know. So I started getting more and more engaged with different cultures. We had a lot of leverage at that time with China. We are starting up a similar facility, a sister facility in China at that time. So we received people. We had several engagement calls with them. At that time, the supply chain folks at the site were in Switzerland. So it was quite interesting. Mobile was a free trade zone, and so all the supply chain deals and negotiations were from Switzerland. So I start to engage more with Swiss people, with French people, and then I my last year in Mobile, I moved to engineering, leading a very important capital project there. And then an opportunity came up, kind of out of the blue, to come back to the region here in Brazil. So I'm currently living in Brazil, to lead our engineering organization from another business inside DuPont. DuPont used to have a business to produce seeds for corn, soy, and all the crops. So I stayed on that role for a little over a year and a half, and then I assumed the whole engineering group for DuPont in Latin America. And then we came up with the merger with Dow. So DuPont back in 2017 merged with Dow, created Dow DuPont. And as a result of that merger, it was created a whole new company called Corteva, just to focus on, agro, okay, crop protection and seeds. So I naturally came to Corteva, stayed with the engineering role for a few years. And then Corteva invited me to assume a global role. It was my first global role in engineering for project controls. It was back in mid-2019. And then beginning of 2021, I had this great opportunity to come to procurement, which has been a very nice, kind of circling around. I have been with manufacturing, supply chain, engineering, now with procurement. And to lead our global team for capital procurement. We invest quite a bit of money every year in terms of our capital projects, and it's a global responsibility. I already have a global role, but now with a bigger scope inside procurement. We have investments and facilities in US, France, Spain, Italy, Romania, Ukraine, Turkey, India, China, you name several different countries, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. So this thing about the multicultural and truly engage with people around the globe, it really, really made home to me. I value culture, different cultures a lot. I learned it over the year that there is no right or wrong culture. There are just different cultures, So that's a little bit of my story. I also have had the opportunity over the years to do some MBAs in, strategic management and automation project process control, several different, training course and development course. So very, very happy with the position that I have, and continue to expand. I just assumed an extended role now to lead indirect procurement as well for Latin America. So very excited to deal with different people, different cultures, different countries. Okay. So sorry to extend a little bit, but I thought it'd be interesting to share with people.
That was a very interesting kind of journey, right? So
Yes.
I am very interested to understand how what was it like moving from Brazil to Mobile, Alabama to lead an engineering team, right? That's what it was. It was an engineering team.
It was originally to lead the production, a couple of production facilities at the site, and then engineer. But you know, some people have made that same question to me. And first of all, when you get out of your comfort zone, it's like a blessing, right? So you really start seeing the world from a different lens. You know, it's like, you know, opening the Pandora you know, box and say, hey, what should we do different to continue being effective? I think I was effective up to that time already, you know.
Yeah.
Or otherwise I haven't wouldn't be invited to go to Mobile and make all the change. But it comes a whole new. You need to have a whole new strategy on how to really motivate people, how to gain people's respect, you know. Um, and regardless if you're moving from Brazil to US, or if you're moving from the US to Germany, or from India to US, whatever, you know, it's different culture. People will see you as a stranger, you know, and
Mhm.
you need to learn how they live, how the culture, how they handle culture, what are the things that they value, but also at the same token, you're bringing your expertise. You're
Mhm.
going there because we're bringing something to the table. So it's you need to combine these things, you know. So respect the culture and respect the people, gain the respect and appreciation from people, but also come to do what you're brought to do, right? To improve. And always, again, there is no right or wrong, and that's what I have learned. So it's just different culture, and if you come with a continuous improvement perspective and approach, people will start to appreciate you for respecting their culture, respecting them, and also, you know, bringing something to the table, you know.
Yeah. I think your background in Black and Six Sigma and all of that stuff has that continuous improvement built in. And as you deal with multiple cultures, as you deal with multiple people, you mentioned, living in Mobile, you dealt with Swiss supply chain people. How did how did that entire like triangle of interesting cultural relations, right? How did that define the way that you work moving forward?
Very interesting question. And actually, when I came to Mobile, to be honest, there were some tension between the Swiss people and the people and the local people in Mobile. And I worked with both sides to say, hey, we need to improve, right? So we need to get to a better position. So supply chain needs product, needs us to be reliable, but we also need from supply chain, you know, forecasts. You know, we need to have insurance of raw materials. We need to work like an orchestra, right? So everyone has to play the instrument accordingly, correct?
Yeah.
So I think it is this mindset of how how can I help me help you? You know, how can we work together to make sure that we deliver what is expected, you deliver what is expected, and how can we work through this triangle that you mentioned? Because on top of the Swiss people, we also have people in other parts of US, right? So we're in Mobile, but our headquarters was in Wilmington, and we had to attend people. So it is a lot of engagement, and another kind of a secret source, if you will. It's invest time to engage with people, regardless the culture. Something that I learned is that all of us, we want to be respected, we want to be appreciated, and we want to be valued regardless the culture. That's unique for any, that's the standard for any culture, you know. So if you really take the time to engage with people, if you invest time to do that, the likelihood of you know, shortening the gap between culture A, B, or C increase significantly, and people start to really appreciate you because you are delivering and deserving quality time to them. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. Um, I mean, I think that's a great mindset that you have. right? And that's not necessarily a mindset that's developed depending on your age. Right now, it's a little bit different, right? When you go into management trainings, you go into leadership trainings, now they talk about understanding motivation, delivering respect, leading, being a servant leader. It
Servant
wasn't like
leader.
that in the 80s and 90s when older people like me were coming up and working in financial services. It was like, get it done, no matter how you got to do it, right? And I love that thought process that you brought to the table. You're bringing two very, very different cultural mindsets together. And as a leader, despite the fact that you don't have direct control over some of these processes, right? You didn't own supply chain. You managed to both influence and motivate them to continuously improve. And I think that's a great mindset. But my question then becomes, right? I talked a little bit about motivation. How did you discover their motivation? Like, sometimes people are reluctant to tell you what they need, especially if there's a different cultural mindset or if there's a different way of speaking, right? How did you overcome that kind of trepidation?
Another great question. So something that I also learned over the years that when people see a structured process, they normally tend to get motivated. Okay. So when I say a structured process, it's really, comes more to the leadership style that we mentioned, right? So putting a process in place to have KPIs, to have goals, to have to say, hey, that's what we need to achieve. What are, the means to get to that? What are the things that we need to, the balls that we need to juggle, right? And no one of the balls can drop. Things
Right.
like, safety, quality, cost, team development, these sort of things. And then as we start to put a process in place, you start to show to people the kind of what's in there for them, right? So if we achieve that together, these are the opportunities that you have for yourself to develop. So the same way that I'm a very focused on, KPIs, leadership, making sure that we deliver the results, I'm also very focused on people development. So during these engagements with the people working with me, I'm always talking about development. I'm always bringing to the table development opportunities. I'm always sharing with them, some best practices that I have seen over the years. So the combination of these things, what I have seen over the years is that it really motivates people to deliver and bring to the table the max of their performance. Bringing their true spirit, their true value to the table. That's how I would answer your question.
No, that's a great answer to the question. That's actually probably a perfect answer to that question, right? The principles around continuous improvement is always about what's in it for me to get better, right? Continuous improvement and
Absolutely.
motivation, right? What's in it for me to do this? What's in it for me to make this change? And actually there's a funny comment in the chat based on what we were talking about before we started, right? Vic Catalano said, when I moved from New York to North Carolina in 1970, my coworkers wanted to know what country I was from, and they all wanted me to speak more slowly. Vic, right before we started, Klauss and I were talking about, the cultural differences being a New Yorker, even within the United States. And I was telling him about working with an organization. I was consulting with an organization in Georgia, and it was the same thing. It was like, okay, why are you talking so slow? Can we speed this up? And that brings out a great challenge, right? There's a difficulty in dealing with certain people when you have an expectation of the way things are supposed to be, right? I am a New Yorker. I talk fast. I'm aggressive. We've got a way we do things. We walk fast. It's just the way that we are as people, and that's the way that we've had to develop. And the expectations for us are that other people will adjust to our style, right? But that doesn't always work. And that leads to difficulties. Can you talk to me about a time when there were cultural difficulties or when there were cultural challenges that led to difficulties or dealing with difficult people?
Oh, sure. And so I'll get you something very linked with what you just described, right? So it's obvious there is a different accent from southern and northern in US, right? So when I came to Mobile, I was very much, familiar with the northern accent. So it was quite an adjustment to me, to be honest. But I think the first thing is you come with you're trying to bridge the gap is really to take the time to understand where the person is coming from. So even because the person is speaking different than you are used to, or even slowly, as you mentioned, um, and really trying to take the time also to understand the culture behind that behavior. Okay. I also have worked quite a bit with people from Europe. Okay, which people tend to say about European culture, right? European culture is 25 different countries or so, different
Mm-hmm.
cultures, right? So
Yep.
even Portugal to Spain, France to Italy, they're completely different, England. So taking the time to understand, first of all, uh, share with the person that you are there to help. We're not there to create more problems. Okay. So I have had different situations that we're having, the capital projects that were very, complex and stressful that we need to implement out of the blue. And I always come the mindset, no, we need someone local and so forth. And then I would come to the person and say, hey, let's work together. I'm totally in for a local person, but I'm also coming to the play, with my experience.
Yeah.
So I have been doing this for a while. So let's work together. Let's be transparent. If you have any issues, I'm more than happy to listen to them. I'm more than happy to work with you. Um, Another situation that just came to my mind, we buy some stuff from the Scandinavian countries. So it's a completely different culture as well. So they're very organized, but very standardized in terms of not making change, controlling change as much as possible, which I'm also a big fan of that. But sometimes you need to have flexibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's again just some few examples of taking the time to really understand the culture. Um, Another one that just came to my mind: there are some cultures in the globe that are very hierarchical. You know, India, China, Mexico. So when you take the time to understand these cultural aspects, you get yourself prepared as a leader. You can get yourself prepared as a leader to deal with that and work with them on that. And again, there is no right or wrong. It's just their culture. You have your culture, they have their culture. But and when you take the time to really understand and deep dive on this, it makes your life much easier. And going back to my previous point, as you come with this continuous improvement mindset, as you come with a good leadership foundation, a process to improve, a process to get better day in and day out, all these things, they marry up. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you can get with a very powerful strategy, So that's kind of how I would answer the question as well.
That's good. That's good. So going back to like this situation, right? We're all procurement folks here, right? We all have to deal with our suppliers. We all have to negotiate with our suppliers. Can you tell me about a situation where there were cultural differences that led to difficulties in your negotiation? Do you have any of
Yeah,
those?
sure. I do, sure. Before going to the specific example, let me say something about negotiation as a whole, okay? There are some cliches about, developing a strategy for negotiation. Believe me, that really works. When you take the time to get yourself prepared, to to understand the strategy, to do a SWOT analysis, to define what are the given and takes. So come to the table, to the bargain, table, to the meetings with a spirit to negotiate. So if you truly have a spirit to negotiate, you're gonna focus on some stuff and gonna give up some other stuff. Be prepared for that. What are the compromise that you can make? So get yourself and the team making the negotiation prepared to that. Okay. So one challenge negotiation, it's with a global supplier. I'll not say the name for respective reasons, but we have a very good global agreement with this company, but we're having a lot of issues in Europe again. So we had to do a whole new strategy with the European folks, engaging the folks in the US, but really dealing on from a different perspective, understanding what are the snagging points with the European folks, why we're not seeing the same performance that we're seeing in US, in Europe, what are the knobs that we could turn to improve, how could we leverage the good relationship that we have in US, that we have in other parts of the globe. What are the barriers? Is there a technical constraint? Is there a resource constraint? So really sitting on the table with a spirit of improving and another cliche that we listen a lot is win-win, right? So, and again, it's also true. It has to be win-win. We're all experienced people, right? We have dealt with several different scenarios, several different situations. When you come to discuss with someone and it's not a win-win, we will pick it up. We will recognize that, right? At least you're gonna have something telling us, right? So the bell is gonna ring in our mind, say, hey, it's not the right approach here. So always come to the table with this win-win approach, okay? So I could share all the situations, but there is no single negotiation that will be the same of the previous one.
Absolutely.
Don't go to a negotiation with the mindset, no, because it worked with a supplier A, it will automatically work with the supplier B, So that is not going to happen. And even if we think from a customer standpoint, it's the same way, right? So if we're trying to do something with a new customer, it's not the same as the previous customer. Try to get yourself grounded as much as possible on information about them. In Corteva, we have a whole market intelligence team. So I have been driven a lot with my team, never go to a negotiation without, taking the time with our market intelligence team to grab, public data about that company, It helps tremendously, So all these steps, really help on negotiating and again, dealing with different cultures as well,
Yeah. From a negotiation perspective, there's one really quick cultural anecdote that I have. I worked as a consultant for a large company that made starch. And one of our suppliers was, I don't know where they were. The guy that they dealt with was a gentleman. He was from Nigeria. And he absolutely despised the person in procurement that he worked with. So it was over Christmas. And it was like I don't know, the 28th of December or something like that. And he's calling in looking for someone in procurement because he wants to get his contract done. Who's the only person that's there? Me, the 25-year-old consultant, right? So talked to the guy on the phone. We were still in paper files time, so I had to go and find all of the backup in somebody's drawer and go through this file cabinet to find out all his information. And he wanted to get things done before the end of the year, and he had a really horrible experience with our procurement folk, and it was really based on the difference in the way that people communicate. And he had a very strong accent. The person that he was talking to did not have a lot of patience, and they weren't used to dealing with someone like him. And having the conversation, and like you said, understanding the market. I had happened to be involved in a couple of the other deals. So I knew what the going rate was. But just sitting there and talking to him and talking around his goals, in an hour's conversation, I managed to save about 20% against what we were expecting to pay. So, it really, you're absolutely right. That servant leadership, that continuous improvement, and that understanding, that mindset of understanding motivation based on their culture and based on building a respectful relationship is the thing that leads to greater results.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was it like hiring and supervising globally?
Very interesting question.
Right?
Yeah, I would say that so nowadays we were talking about the difference from the 80s, 90s to nowadays. So I would say that first thing is that people around the globe, they are expecting from leaders to hire from a hiring and supervising standpoint to apply some of these more modern concepts that we see a lot in internet, we see lives and so forth. So I feel that the first of all, people are more and more expecting to see from leaders, no matter where the person comes from, these more updated and advanced skill sets. Okay, so
Right.
if you want to be a global leader, get yourself prepared. There is so much out there. There are so many different opportunities. So many different training courses. I was something that really helped me 5 or 6 years ago. I took a training course on how to lead and manage global teams. Okay, so that really helped me. So some of these things that I'm sharing today, I learned it there. Okay, so the very first thing that I would say is get yourself prepared. And it's so easy. When I started as a leader at I don't know, 17, 18 years ago, we didn't have not even close to what the easiness to develop yourself as we have today.
Yeah.
Not to mention when I start college. So I'm from the booking time, that you have to go to the library to get things and learn things. So that's the very first message. Second is take advantage of the local people to support you. So every company, if you're doing business in country A, B, or C, they're gonna have, HR people. They're gonna have local leaders there. So take the time to engage with HR to understand the concerns, constraints, tips, restrictions. If we're starting a new country to supervise a person, engage with HR, understand if the person is taking a new role, for instance, if there are local training courses that they recommend. I just have a situation now with a person in France that she's taking a new role. So we worked with the local HR and they came up with a good suggestion for a training development opportunity for the person. So went through the cost and with my manager approved that. So again, it's a simple example, straightforward example, but I think illustrates what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Also try to understand the laws in the country. Okay, so each country has its own laws. Again, there is nothing right or wrong. It's just the different laws and cultures from the country. So take the time to do that. And it's if we're hiring people, invest time to participate on the hiring process. Don't just delegate the process. Take the time to engage with people, to interview people, to really understand what's going on. If it is possible, go to the country, go to the place. But the more and more we have tools that are bridging the gap of doing these things remotely, right?
Yeah.
So these are some of the tips. And from a supervising standpoint, on my mind, in my opinion, nothing replace the one-on-one engagements. Nothing replace taking time with the people that you work with to have one-on-ones, to build the rapport, to really instill trust with the person. as a leader, the people working with you, they need to trust you more than anything, you know. Of course, different people will trust you, will rely on you differently, but in average, you need to make sure that all your team members, that they appreciate working with you, that they know that you respect them. They will, the likelihood of them respecting you, if you do that, increase exponentially. And
Mhm.
of course, invest in their development. Everyone realizes when a leader is really, is truly and genuinely invest on the, it's trying to invest on the development versus the one that is just a fake, you know. So these are some of the things that I would say from a global standpoint that you should. This applies, of course, to local, you know, hiring and supervising, but from a global standpoint, this is even more important because you're not, you don't have the time to have a coffee, have a whole conversation with the person. So having these rituals and this process well set up is really important.
No, I think that's great. And there is one of my questions was going to be, about the differences between how we manage now in this kind of hybrid remote world versus back in the day, like us old folks would say, being face to face with somebody, taking them to lunch, taking them for coffee, building out that professional rapport, and then using that to define motivations, define their development plans, and the like. Have you done, like you talk about all the places that you've worked with and all the people that you've worked with, the different cultures and different organizations? Have you done a lot of traveling and you know moving around, right? I know you lived in the US and you lived in Brazil. Have there been other places where you've had to kind of temporarily relocate for projects?
No,
Or
I
perhaps,
basically live in the US, in different parts of Brazil. Okay. But it's a very interesting question as well. So nothing I use I say a lot that we're still human beings, right? As human beings, no matter how much technology we have, the face-to-face contact is really important. So when you have a chance, make sure that you meet the person face to face. Make sure that you take the time to be with the person and travel as much as you can. So the straight answer to your question is that traveling is really important. We can't put this down. Um, of course, we just came from 2.5 years of a lot of restrictions. But as restrictions are lifted and we come back to a normal working style, take the time to visit people, take the time to visit your customers, your suppliers. The report, nothing will ever replace, the face-to-face contact, in my opinion. Of course, as a servant leader, as you mentioned, with this motivation background mindset, having the one-on-ones, having the rituals with your people, talking with them on a daily basis, show to them that you appreciate them, that you value them. It's extremely important. But never, nothing replaces the face-to-face aspect. Okay. Um, Something also that I have done over the years, they've done a lot of different projects in Latin America countries when I was engineering leader. So I had a ritual to visit the different countries. So Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, different parts of Brazil. Brazil as a continental country, right? And the same mindset in US. So Corteva has facilities in Michigan, in Iowa, in other states, in California. So normally when I visit US, I take 2 weeks, and I normally do a round trip. It's kind of exhausting at the end of the second week, but it pays off big time. So
okay.
always plan also your trips, right? So the trip has to be very meaningful. It's not just for the sake of traveling, right? So it has to be very meaningful. Take the time to prepare, take the time to develop an agenda, take the time to be with your people as much as you can, um, take the time to recognize people, to take people out for, lunch, dinner, pay lunch, do some celebration, recognize the good work. So all these things, they matter quite a bit at the end of the day. And of course, as human being, the more you can personally connect with the person working with you, the biggest the likelihood of success, right? So it's instill trust again, develop the rapport, the relationship. So this is really, really important. I'm probably this year also travel uh, more to Europe. When I was about to do that, the pandemic came to play.
The
But it's
world
also
stopped.
sorry, it's also on my list to do that. Um, to travel abroad to Europe, to different countries, and the same things will matter as I just mentioned. Okay.
So we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to thank you for sating my curiosity and answering all my crazy questions. As a leader, as a global leader, what advice would you give to the younger version of yourself that's just becoming a global leader, right? We have a lot of people on this call. I'm sure some of them are looking at new roles in new organizations that are just going to start, branching out to other countries and other cultures. What advice would you give them, aside from all the other advice you've given today?
One advice I would say is that plan your career, plan where you want to go. Of course, uh, you're gonna just course, but if you take the time early on to define where you want to be in 5, 10, 15 years, things will change for sure, but you have a line of action, right? A course, a direction to go. Okay. Um, when I started as an engineer, I was a very technical oriented person. I invested quite a bit during my chemie school, in years. I learned it quite a bit. I was really good on technical, but I had made the decision from the first 1 or 2 years of working that I would be very strong enough from a technical standpoint, but my intention was to be a leader. So I got myself prepared from the beginning to be a leader. I read a lot of books. I talked with a lot of people to understand what made them success, Um, learning from others, it's really important. Learning what went well and also what didn't go well with others is very important. So develop this whole strategy, where you want to be, where you want to go. Things will change. So probably if I go back a few years, did I say exactly that I would be 25, 28 years after starting working on this specific position? No, but I always had on my mind that I would be a leader, that I would keep growing, and I would always love it, different cultures. I always love it to learn different language. I speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese as my mother language, and I speak English, you know, and I try to learn as much as I can other language. So these things were on the when I started developing this strategy, they were there. Also, um, get yourself, value the people aspect. If you want to be a leader, there is no way in the world, if you don't value the people aspect, you're not going to be a good leader.
Right.
So that's another advice. You have to deliver, you have to learn how to deliver, you have to have this continuous mindset improvement, you have to have a process. But if people, if they don't see, if they don't realize that you value people, honestly, you are ruined as a leader. They will undermine you because they don't see that you value them, that you want their development at the end of the day. Okay? So these are some of the tips. Also, develop your connections. It's also a cliche, right? That we need to do to develop the relationships and networking and so forth. And it's really true. It's amazing how when you have a good networking, how that works. Then when you can pick up the phone and call someone and say, "Hey, I'm having this situation. Uh, what would you do?" Or I'm having these two different paths that I can pursue. What would be your advice in one or the other, or or another path? This really makes a difference. I can tell you that over my years, I have some gurus, if you will. So every now and then I pick up the phone and say, hey, what do you think about that? What
Mm.
did you do for me, you know? So I think developing the network, it's very important. And again, nowadays with all this connectivity, all the new things, it's extremely easy to do that. So these are some of the things that I would say to young people about, you know, develop themselves. And perhaps last but not least, get yourself prepared. If you say that in 10 years, I want to be here, what I'm going to do to get there, right? So, and some people say that, I don't know, training 30% of the things we learn are from formal course and 65, 70% are from day-to-day experience. That's also true.
Yeah.
Work with your company to say, hey, what are the things that I can do in the future to get prepared to position A, B, or C. They say that we need to manage our career, right? So that's true. Company will do for you some stuff, but if you don't make a decision to manage your career, nothing's gonna happen by luck, you know. So
Yeah.
be intentional, you know, drive that, and companies will see that. Your leader will see that. I can assure you.
Klauss, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a very interesting conversation. I appreciate so much you being open about your past, the advice that you've given. It's been excellent. Thank you so much. Vic's,
My pleasure. My
hit the nail
pleasure.
right on the head with your comment. Vic Catalano said, your advice has been excellent, especially the importance of networking and developing relationships to learn from others and keep growing. Thank you so much, Vic. You've been very active in the chat. I appreciate you. And again, Klauss, and on behalf of, you know, ISM New Jersey and myself, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. My pleasure. Take care, everyone.